I thought we were going to be distracted with Republican calls to ban abortion across the country. Well, the polls must be teaching them something, because I'm not hearing about abortion today. For many years, all I heard from them was abortion is murder. And the millions of the millions of persons who are being murdered by abortion. And they demanded the overthrow of Roe versus Wade, and they got their way. And yesterday, Senator Lindsey Graham introduced legislation for a national criminal ban on abortion. But of course, the so-called pro-life forces want to go further in the states and ban it completely. A lot of them don't even want to allow exceptions for rape or incest. I thought our colleagues were going to explain what their position really is. I would invite them to do so, as long as they don't want to talk about the legislation before us today. Why don't they tell us what their position on abortion is? Because America wants to know. I think their position has changed somewhat. They're singing a somewhat different tune since the people of Kansas, by 20 points, destroyed their anti-choice agenda and explained to them in numerical terms that the people of America are on the side of freedom and the rights of women and men and families to make their own decisions, and not to have those decisions being made by Lindsey Graham, one senator who yesterday pronounced that he chose 15 weeks as the right point to criminalize abortion. He chose that himself. What is their position now? America wants to know. What is their position? Do they support a national criminal ban on abortion? Are they going to allow any exceptions for rape or incest? What is their position on it, if they don't want to talk about the legislation at hand? Meantime, the Democrats continue to fight for lower drug prices, for a record, unprecedented, historic investment in renewable energy. We are addressing the problems of the future. At the same time, we are defending the integrity of the federal civil service and our workforce, which was compromised and abused in so many ways by the last administration. We are defending the rights of whistleblowers to tell the truth about what's taking place in terms of political and public corruption, and not to have to face retaliation from their supervisors. And we are defending the institutions of democracy, including the census, against all of the kinds of machinations and corruption and political abuse that we saw in the last administration. And we're glad that the Supreme Court struck down their last interference with the census by trying to paste questions on outside of the rule of law on the short form. And this legislation is designed to protect the integrity of the census, along with the civil service, along with the whistleblowers. But as long as my dear colleagues and friends don't want to talk about the legislation at hand, please clarify for America what their plan is to take away the health rights of American women and their families. Are they supporting the plan we heard yesterday announced by Lindsey Graham for a nationwide federal criminal ban?
Here's what I think is the most impactful part of this predictably devastating speech by Jamie Raskin. He mentions that Lindsey Graham chose the 15-week cutoff of the national abortion ban that he introduced yesterday. Just think about that for a moment. Lindsey Graham, one guy, one man who has no children, no significant other, no family, made the unilateral decision about a new law that would impact hundreds of thousands of people each year if enacted. This one guy decided, just because he wanted to, that no American would be able to get essential reproductive health care after 15 weeks because someone who has zero experience with any reproductive health in his own life decided that that's what he would decree. Coming to you straight from the party of small government. It would almost be funny if it wasn't so dangerous. And so now that Lindsey Graham, who, again, has no children, no significant other, and no family from which to draw even a shred of experience while imposing this ridiculous undue burden on others, now that he's introduced this legislation, Republicans have an obligation to not be so shy and reveal where they stand on that issue. Because I get that they may want to skirt this question, but these people aren't accountants. They don't get to keep their political views private. They have an obligation to reveal how they would vote on legislation that impacts the bodily autonomy of half the population. And by the way, those who refuse to answer really are telling on themselves, because if they were against it, they would just say they were against it. And if they can't bring themselves to say that, then that's very clearly because they support the ban but know how politically toxic it is. And not for nothing, but when you're too chicken shit to say out loud how you would vote, you're probably on the wrong side of that issue. Of course, they can always take the Blake Masters route and just outright deny your position as part of your pivot to the general. Masters' website used to read, quote, "I am 100% pro-life," which was duly scrubbed once he realized he needed to appeal to those not only on the far-right ranks of his party. That language is now gone. He also deleted a line that detailed his support for, quote, "a federal personhood law, ideally a constitutional amendment that recognizes that unborn babies are human beings that may not be killed." Why? Because Blake Masters, like so many others in his party, wants only power. And so if that means he has to outright lie about his positions to make himself seem more palatable to the electorate, then he very clearly won't hesitate to do exactly that. Because when it's principles versus power, they'll choose power every single time. The fact is that this is an issue of the dog finally catching the car. Republicans, for years, decades, have been wailing about how abortion is murder and how it should be banned, and now that they have begun banning it and are sitting on the receiving end of pretty devastating electoral blowback, suddenly they don't have much to say on the issue anymore. Suddenly they're scrubbing their websites. Suddenly they want to talk about the border and inflation instead. Except that's not going to happen. Democrats across the country, in every single district, should make absolutely sure that people know where the purported party of small government stands when it comes to a woman's bodily autonomy. Because even if you don't personally believe in abortion, which is your prerogative, chances are pretty damn high that you do have strong feelings about what a bunch of old men in Washington, D.C. are dictating when it comes to what a person can or cannot do with their own bodies. I've personally heard from a number of people who've admitted that they're against abortion, but are incensed at the idea that the government should be imposing edicts about what healthcare is and isn't allowed. In other words, Republicans have pissed off the pro-choice folks, and they've pissed off the small government folks on their own side, all in their desperation to continue pandering to the farthest fringes of their base. And let's be clear, the reason these Republicans are running scared is because Americans have made it crystal clear how they view the GOP's position on abortion restrictions. In the 5 special elections since the Dobbs decision was handed down, Democrats have overperformed their 2020 partisan lead by 11 points. 11 points! Even if you don't count the massive 18-point swing from flipping Alaska's House seat, Democrats are still averaging 9.5-point swings. In a midterm cycle where history says Republicans should trounce the Democrats. Instead, Republicans have been so hell-bent on stripping people of their rights, and even while Americans are broadcasting just how disgusted they are, still Republicans are charging forward. That is the consequence of having a party that has zero interest in being held accountable to the people they're supposed to serve. If you were wondering about the danger of allowing these people to take power, this is just a preview. This is just a hint. If they'll take arguably one of the least popular positions in America before an election, just imagine what it'll be like when they don't have to face voters. You may think that they're extreme now, this won't even scratch the surface. So good on Jamie Raskin for calling these people out. And my unsolicited advice to every single Democrat is to make damn sure that the voters know where the GOP stands on this issue. Whether they support a national abortion ban, whether they support their own state's bans, whether they believe in exceptions for rape and incest, what they believe should happen with non-viable fetuses and other complications. Because if they want to try and legislate away women's rights, then at a bare minimum they should be forced to answer for their positions. Before you go, if you enjoyed this video and want to see more, please make sure to subscribe to my channel. You can click the thumbnail right here on this screen. And if you want to support my work even further, the best way is to subscribe to my podcast, No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen. There you can check out my interviews with major players in the world of politics, including President Biden, Vice President Kamala Harris, Pete Buttigieg, Elizabeth Warren, Katie Porter, Jamie Raskin, and so many more. Plus other interviews that live exclusively on the podcast. That link is also right here on this screen, or just search No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen wherever you listen to podcasts.